The Able to Care podcast is sponsored by Able Training Support Limited, who build partnerships with organisations to develop confidence and competence in their team to promote positive outcomes for all. Find the link in the description. Hello and welcome to the Able to Care podcast. It's another episode and I'm your host, Andy Baker. And this episode I'm privileged to be speaking to Monique Thoonsen, a renowned author, trainer and expert in sensory processing. Monique authored Sensory Solutions in the Classroom and Making Sense of Your Senses, both of which I previously reviewed on this podcast. So Monique's work focuses on practical strategies to support those with sensory needs. So first off, thank you so much for joining me all the way from the Netherlands this morning.
Lovely to join you. Thank you for your invite.
Well, so we've come on and we're going to be chatting about one of my favourite subjects. I've been quite excited about today's interview because I love the subject of sensory processing. Those who are long-time listeners, viewers know I've touched on it a few times. And I say I always come across it on the two extremes, being both children, particularly those on the autistic spectrum or neurodivergent, and then also elderly care as well. There's a sensory factor around there. So I think it's something that our senses are so important to us, aren't they, as far as
They
how we
are.
navigate
I mean,
the
it's
world?
the most important. It's the way we get all the information in from the outside and from our own body. And being able to make sense of that really helps. And if you can make sense of it, that's can be difficult. Yeah. And I love the subject too. I've been working with it for about 30 years and teaching for about 15 years. And I just love it. Yeah.
Absolutely. So should we start off then? Obviously, some people might be first-time listeners or not know much about the subject. So as far as can you explain what is sensory processing and why it's so crucial for teachers, parents and carers to kind of understand about it?
Well, we need information on our surroundings and from the inside of our bodies to know if we're safe and to know if we should act upon some of those signals. So the only way we get this information is through all our senses. And through them, we can survive because we get input that tells us, oh, we're not safe, so we might have to move away or be active so that we don't get hurt. And the other, we adapt to all the signals. So let's say, for instance, I feel a draft. And I could put on a sweater, I could close the window, or I could enjoy the draft because it's really hot. Or when you're outside, your senses tell you because you hear and you see a car, okay, be safe. Is it safe to cross? And I'm wearing glasses right now, and I might feel them sliding down, so I'll push them up. And so all the information from our surroundings, we kind of decide, is it important? And our nervous system decides if it's important, and then we act upon it or we don't. But it's really the nervous system that has kind of a sensory input filter. And this filter decides, is the information important? And are you going to be aware of it? Because there's a lot of information it filters out and we're not even aware of it. Luckily, because there's so much information around us. So if this filter does not work correctly, it might pass through too much information. And if it does work, you're neutral, it's a neutral way of processing. And then we also have people that have a filter that's much too close. And there's not enough information coming through. So they miss information from their surroundings. They miss information from their body. They might not feel they're hungry or they need to go to the bathroom because the information doesn't come through.
There's one of the analogies that you use in your book, the door supervisor analogy.
Yeah, exactly.
I thought that was a really good way of putting it over. I enjoyed that as far as a simple kind of metaphor or analogy, so that and whether the doorman's a good or a bad doorman, really being able to filter what's important, who should come in the club and who shouldn't, or just not paying attention properly, and either everybody's coming in or being over the top and nobody comes in.
Exactly. So it's either way too busy or there's nothing to do. Yeah.
And I think there's there's two parts to that sensory processing, isn't there, that you kind of referred to there. One is sensory kind of modulation, being able to regulate the amount of traffic coming through. If we carry a kind of
Yeah.
doorman analogy on, that it's either letting too many people through the door or not letting enough people through the door. But you've also then got the discriminatory side of things. There's sensory discrimination, which is who should I let in, what's important, and what's dangerous and what's safe, and being able to tell the difference between that.
Yeah, because if something is dangerous, it's really, really important information and you should act upon it immediately, which also means that other information won't be coming in. So if you feel, if you have somebody that is over responsive for touch, and they feel their clothes on their body and it's really something they do not like, and it gives them stress, they'll alert you that. And if they're sitting in a classroom and the teacher is explaining something, the touch is more important to them because they think it's a dangerous input, and so they won't be listening. The auditory doesn't come in then. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's I think obviously when we're children, we are highly defensive in the fact that everything could be a potential danger at that point in our lives, isn't it? And through our experiences, we have to learn what is safe and what isn't safe. What the doorbell means to us as far as that noise, or as you said, like the contact of a caregiver or anything. Is that a good or a bad thing? It's got to be something that we develop. And I think most children.
Yeah, and also to go outside, and to learn about the outside, and you have to fall and get up again to learn all these things, and you have to go play and climb and play with sand, and this is all very important to learn what is safe and what is not safe.
Mm. So when we talk about sensory integration, as far as the combination of all of those senses coming together to try and make sense of the world, because it's not just, no sense works independently, does it? We kind of make a collaboration of, absolutely. So it's that integration between. How does somebody struggling with either that modulation or discrimination, or how does it affect them on a kind of a day-to-day or throughout their development?
Well, it's just really hard. Let's take, for instance, people that do not get enough information, that are under responsive. Um, it's hard for them to cope because they don't know all the things that are going around. They miss information, so people will think maybe also they're lazy because they're not attending. They might think they're not interested, but it's just something in their body that it's not coming through strong enough. They need more. They need stronger input. So here you have children that that hear you're. They might hear you're lazy, which they're not, because when they've just been to the playground, for instance, and then they come into the class, they can attend because their bodies are more active because they've just moved, and you see a whole different person. They're willing to attend, they're able to attend, and the willing and able, you really have to put them apart, because usually people think they're not willing, but you have to look at the sensory processing part and look at when can they do it. They're moving and now they can do it. They're sitting still and they can't. They're not unwilling, they're just not able to attend. So that's big, because also self-esteem will not work well, if you hear that you're lazy and you're not. People, children want to do good. They want to succeed. And in the case of, for instance, when somebody's over responsive, they might really want to control situations. They're going to say, I want to sit there. I do not want to wear this. I do not want to eat that. I only want to eat this. They might be thought of as manipulative while they're trying to survive in a world where the input is just too much, so they cannot handle it. And their way to handle it, which I think is really good that they do that, is by manipulating, by trying to say, I can handle it if we're doing it this way. And it's hard for people to understand that are not over responsive, that like a noise can be so painful, or that a touch can be so painful. And they might go like, oh yeah, it's not that bad. It's not that loud. Um, So you need to know that you have your way of processing input and other people have their way. So you cannot use your own way of living and experiencing like it's the way everybody does. You know, some people really like fast and speed and jumping, and others like to sit and swing a little bit in a hammock, and then they enjoy it. So one of my missions is to have people understand that we're all different, and yeah, let's make some room for each other.
I think I think that just reminded me of one chapter in your book. Is it, if I get it right, is it Green Tea or Cappuccino? Is that the name of the title of the?
Yeah,
Have I got that right?
probably
Yeah.
espresso. So
Oh,
probably
espresso. Yeah,
espresso.
yeah.
Yeah, a double espresso. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You
So is
know,
that?
some people, yeah, want the double espresso, and the others really enjoy their green tea. Yeah,
Yeah, and that's kind of we all have sensory differences, don't we? As you said there,
yeah,
like some people like it quiet, some people like it noisy, some people like it
yeah,
bright, some people like it dark. Like I don't like eating in the dark. I don't. I like to be able to see my food, whereas some people love the ambience of a kind of a darkened room and enjoying the being able to
yeah,
extra enjoy the taste sensations that they get from reducing other stimulus. So it's and some people like their music loud and some people like it quiet. And it's we all have that ability to recognize that people like things different, but it's just where it goes to the extremes that we really struggle, isn't it? As kind of going, yeah, but that's too different, that's too much, or yeah.
it doesn't even have to be too different, because I always show a photo of a classroom with kids. They're like about 3, 4 years old, and it's carnival. And you see this group of kids, they have costumes on, and they're obviously dancing to music. And there's one kid sitting to the side. You see him from the back, and he's sitting at the side. And I always ask, okay, what do you think? Is this child that is on the side, is he over or under responsive? And people may think he's under responsive because he's not engaging, but actually he's over responsive and he is having fun at the side watching. This is not that different. And here we have sometimes teachers will go like, come on, let's go dance with this child. While they should really sit next to the child and say, having fun. Yeah, really having fun. It's beautiful. So so these are small differences, but this is the having fun of people that are become over responsive is so different to the having fun of people that are under responsive or neutral. So in groups, you really have to know this, because if you as a teacher really are neutral or unresponsive and think fun is music and let's get dressed up and this is great, this is not for all of us.
Mm.
I don't want to be in the middle. I enjoy from the side, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there is that. Yeah, I suppose it's the introvert looking at the extrovert, isn't it? The introvert sees the extrovert as too much and annoying, but the extrovert sees the introvert as potentially depressed or disengaged.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I think there's really a connection between the introvert and over responsive and the extrovert and the under responsive. I think you can really connect those two.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think it
Yeah,
then whether the individual is kind of sensory seeking or whether they're sensory avoiding,
yeah,
or
yeah,
or whether they're sensory slumper, the kind of it's too much for me, I can't cope, or I want more, I want more, I want more. Is
yeah,
very much the extrovert and introvert kind of behaviours as well, isn't it? Um,
yeah.
so maybe we'll go into a little bit on why this is so important for teachers, parents, and caregivers to kind of really get to grips with. But let's start at what inspired you to write your books? What took you down the journey of looking into sensory processing?
When I learned about it, and this was in the States, I lived in Florida then, and I did some courses with Sensory Integration International. That's Jean Ayers started that, and everything I learned, I brought to my team. I'm a physical therapist, and I brought to my colleagues, and I talked about it. And I was then working in a school with learning disabled children. And we also brought the information to the teachers. And what I saw is that they were like, oh, this is how it works. Oh, that's why he's showing that behavior. And I'm like, okay, this really works. People recognize it. and then they know why some kids wiggle more and the others want more distance, and they can work with that, and we can give even more things, the advice that can help. So I just really, wherever I could, I would teach this. And then I'm like, well, I can do better by just writing it down and sharing it with as many people as possible. And in 2014, I found a publisher that wanted to publish the information. And then at that point, I was doing studies with a friend of mine, Carmen, and she was really good in putting the words on paper in a way that people would, in layman's terms and in an interesting way, because I was falling into the pit of using too much medical terms. So this combination with Carmen and me, and then the publisher that said, "Yeah, go ahead and write about this. This sounds really interesting." We put together the first book, and that was the sensory solutions in the classroom. And it was a way to make information that was really a little bit medical to all the public. And it was received really well. And what was really funny is that we wrote about school. We wrote about primary school. And then everyone kind of responded as a parent when they talked to us about it. Said, "Oh, now I understand how this works at home. And when we're at the dinner table and he can't sit still, and she's saying, 'Oh, don't, not so loud.'" And so that's then we decided, okay, we'll also write a book about the home situation. This has not been translated yet. And that was just also very much very well received. And all the time I thought, I want to teach the kids. I want the kids to know how this works for them. Do I need a lot of sensory input? Do I love it? And how do I get it without disturbing anyone in the classroom or at home? And where do I get too much input? And how do I calm myself? I really wanted them to know, because if they know when they're young, they can take this into their whole lives and make their lives easier. So that's where I started the workbook. And so making sense of your senses. And then because I really, my background, I worked a lot with people with learning disabilities. So this was the last book that we wrote for children with learning disabilities. And also that still needs to be translated. But that's a lot of work. So I have some other projects going now. But just seeing that the information, putting it in layman's terms, everyone understanding it, and it being so well received, that really inspired us to go on with this. Yeah.
You have got some really nice analogies and metaphors within the books, and I think it's both the two that obviously have been translated over to English. So the sensory solutions in the classroom, there's some really good stuff in there to help teachers, and say very accessible. But obviously the workbook that is for children and parents to kind of do together is got to be that very kind of simple way of understanding, isn't it? And I think psychoeducation for children is so important to understand themselves and better navigate the world, and it's that extra work, isn't it?
And also because they'll understand more about their classmates. Why is he wiggling so much, and why does she get angry easily? Because she's just overstimulated. Yeah, and then you can help her and say, "Well, why don't you go sit in the corner? It's not as busy there." And chair push-ups is one of the strategies we say. And when we introduce this in the class and everybody starts understanding about their own way of processing, and see how the other children are doing, they'll tell each other, like they'll point at each other and say, like, "You need to do some chair push-ups because you're really starting to fall asleep here. You need to activate yourself." It's great, if children can do this amongst each other and understand each other better. Yeah.
100%. I had a situation, I don't know whether I've ever spoken about this on the podcast before, but I was living in a household, had two children in there. One of them had sensory processing issues, and it was his motor sensory system predominantly, so it was his tactile awareness particularly, proprioception to some degree as well. But one of the things, he kept making allegations like, he hit me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And all it
Yeah.
was, I watched it because I thought, well, is he hitting him? Is this other lad hitting him?
Yeah.
Or is he
Yeah.
making up stories? So I watched from a distance one time, and the older lad, we just sent him, can you go and get him for tea? And he just walked in the room, and it genuinely was a tap to the shoulder, a very gentle touch to
Yeah.
the shoulder. But it triggered this flinch from the young lad.
Yeah.
And it was that so obvious. He's not lying. His brain is interpreting that because he hasn't seen him doing it, and this is one of the things I tried to explain,
Ah,
that
yeah. Yeah.
that sensory integration is I use my tactile system, and I can pick that information up. If my tactile system doesn't work as well, I may have to compensate by using other systems. So like my visual system
Visual.
might help
Yeah.
me to go, I see how fast the hand is traveling. I see the intention of the person doing it. So I'm able to know they didn't hit me or they did hit me. Because he didn't see him coming, that was straight away. His brain just said, he hit me. That's it. For the tactile
Yeah.
system alone, he hit me. So I had to kind of teach this other lad exactly as like your book would have been amazing, as far as
Ah, yeah. Yeah.
he's not being bad, he's not lying, he's not trying to get you in trouble. His brain is telling him that you've hit him.
Yeah.
Please don't touch him without him being able to see you. And
Beautiful.
just
I
gentle.
was going to give the same example because you'll have at school, they'll play outside, maybe they'll play some soccer, and then one of them gets really angry and goes to the teacher and goes, he just, he walked right through me.
Yeah.
Stop it. And the kid will go like, what did I do? I didn't do anything, because to them, the touch that was a little bit more touch than everyone wants, he feels it at that point, and the other one goes like, yeah, well, you walking straight through me,
Yeah.
so the kid will really go like, well, really, and he won't understand what he did.
Yeah.
And if you talk about that too in the classroom, you can say, okay, some people, for them, a little bit of touch is enough, and for others, they need more touch, stronger touch to feel it. And so then you give this information, like somebody will touch you and you'll feel like you've been slapped. So let's look at each other, and if you are going too rough, let's give each other a sign, like maybe say time out, and the time out means, okay, you're playing too rough. And the child will know, okay, I'm sorry, I played too rough, I'll back down a little bit. Communicate with each other about it. So explain and then communicate with each other. What do you need, and when is it too much? Yeah.
We had a similar thing with this same lad. He broke fair few chests of drawers before we realised that he also wasn't able to regulate his strength particularly as well. This younger lad, and that's it, isn't it? Is that little bit of understanding going? He's not breaking his drawers because he's careless, thoughtless, badly behaved, naughty, or angry. He's doing it because he can't. His body doesn't regulate his force in the same way that a typical person would. So why are we setting up to fail? Why do we keep buying chests of drawers that he's just going to break? Let's get a tray stacker system where if he throws a tray across the room, we can replace the tray, or it doesn't really matter. And I think that's
instead of being angry all the time,
telling him off. Absolutely.
Yeah. Again, the self-esteem. Yeah.
And I think this is why having access to the information and knowledge about a kind of sensory processing is the earlier we can understand a child's differences and difficulties, the better it's going to be for not just a child, but also for the caregivers, for teachers, for the well-being of generally. Absolutely.
Exactly, because it's horrible if you all the time have to hear like you can't handle things, and for others it's no problem. You think, okay, I'm bad. No, you're not. You just you have different sensory processing. It's okay. Yeah, we can deal with this. Yeah.
Thank you for listening to the Able to Care podcast. If you're enjoying this episode, please like, comment, and share. We really appreciate all of you listeners. So one of the analogies I really liked, and I'd love you to tell me a little bit more about, is the fan model that you've got in your books. So obviously it's a simplified version of polyvagal theory, essentially.
Because it talks about the autonomic nervous system.
Yeah. So would you mind telling us a little bit about the fan model and how that helps, or why it's useful to understand?
We try as much as possible to visualize what's happening, because that seems a way that people can really grab onto the information and hold on to the information. So what we did is we created a fan model, and I'm sure you can put a link into the site so they can look it up later. So it's a tool to visualize systems that are active, and you can actually influence those systems. So you have the autonomic nervous system, and this system decides from all the input: are you safe, or is something not safe, and do we have to act upon it? So if you're safe, you're in the engage and recovery system. And engaging, which we made green as color green, means that you can communicate, you feel good, you do what you want to do or need to do. You can ask for help, which is quite difficult to do, asking for help. But if you're in the green zone, you can ask for help. It's a difficult skill. Sometimes you have to recover because all the input coming. You have to be on the couch with your cup of tea and just sit and do nothing for a while, or lay in the grass and stare at the clouds. Have a pause. And what happens that some people have a hard time getting out of this recovery system. They'll stay in it, and when the break is over, they can't get their level of activity up enough. They need more and stronger input. So if you're stuck in the blue zone, the recovery zone, we can talk about, okay, then you're under responsive and you need more input. And if you get more input, it's a fan. So then the blue part folds together and gives more room for the green part. And then when this autonomic nervous system feels information might be a threat, so they get signals of a threat, you need to be able to fight, flight, or freeze. And this is the stress system. Immediately you go into the stress system. And this is to survive. So you're not living, but you're surviving. So you have to be able to then respond very fast to all the input, which means that in the stress system, we just talked about the filter, the sensory input filter. It'll open up because all the information might be important. A touch, a sound, a movement, a growling dog. You have to respond. You have to, flee. So then you're in the orange system, which is also normal. Sometimes we're in this because if you have to give a presentation for a very large audience, for instance, you might go into your stress system because it's quite something to do. But then you're in front of the audience and you're doing your story. It's going well and you get good results. People are smiling and following. You can move back into the green. And for children, a good example is when it's their birthday. When it's their birthday, they might go into the stress system because, am I getting the gift that I want? And who's coming to visit? And will the cake taste nice? So when they're in this situation and the cake's nice and the birthday gift is good, they are able to go back to the green and enjoy their day. But some people, they'll stick into the stress system, into the orange. We made that orange, and will not be able to come back to the green. And children, for instance, on their birthday will just collapse crying because it's just all too much. And if you're giving your presentations, you might block and cannot continue. Well, here we say you're over responsive and you need means to calm down. And for your presentation, that might be a friend that's in the front row that will smile at you and tell you you're doing okay. And for the birthday, somebody that's really getting over responsive, you might say, okay, before the birthday, we'll already let you know what the gift is. We'll wrap it in film that you can see through it, and we'll put it up on the cupboard and you'll see it. And this is ways to calm an over responsive system. So this means that if you're calming, you're folding the orange part, so there's more room again for the green. And then we have one more color to add at the end, which is red, and that's the emergency system. When the autonomic nervous system thinks, we're unable to flee or fight or freeze, we're not able to survive by that, it's going to shut down. So for instance, in an abusive situation where the person cannot leave, but the emotion and the pain are so much they won't survive if they feel them. The system has a very good answer. It shuts down, it dissociates, and the only thing it's taking care of is temperature and breathing, so we can survive. And then it's waiting for safe signals to be able to return to the green, first to the orange and then the stress system and then to the green. So this is a way that we chose to visualize what's happening. And what we see happening is when we explain this to parents and also to kids, they start talking in colors and they say, oh yeah, he was a little bit in the orange, so he couldn't tie his shoelaces because he was too stressed, so we did it for him. And then when I went outside and he got moving, he was okay again. He went back into the green. So this is a way again to talk about what's happening.
Yes, yeah, I really like it. I think it's, do you actually, when you're teaching, do you use an actual fan itself, or do you just
I
use the
do.
visualize? Yeah, yeah.
I do.
Oh, you've got that.
I've got
Perfect.
one. Yeah. I've got one, and then I can show them, so how to fold it together and how to calm and activate the system. And we even have one that you can write stuff down, so you can give it to the parent and say, okay, this is where we see your daughter going into the blue, these situations, and then this is the advice that we have. These are the strategies you can do. So we write them down and give it to them, so they can do that at home. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. So there's a few bits you went.
Also on the side, has these how you can put that together. Yeah.
Oh, very good. Oh, okay, awesome. So there's some information on there. We'll make sure there's a link to the fan. Yeah, I like some bits in there that were very specific to sensory processing, but actually there's quite a lot in there that's just connected with emotional dysregulation generally, isn't there? As far as, again, it's a basic tool, because whether it be circumstances, the need for predictability, whatever it is, it's still a case of that stress response that we have. One of the things you mentioned in there as a blue, the activation or the energizing of the system is sometimes necessary if that child is kind of under responsive and shutting down a little bit, but not in the disassociate, not the fear response, just the I can't get going.
Well, in the blue they're not shut down. In the blue, the system just not get enough information. It's not strong enough to get them activated. While the red part, the shutdown, is being very, very, very over responsive and then shutting down from that. So the blue is different. The blue is just there's not enough information coming in.
Yeah. So what kind of strategies do you kind of encourage or help people to figure out for children who are in that blue zone then?
Well, we say standing up and learning that's the most given advice. It gives you movement input, which ups the focus. And sometimes you'll have a table that's high enough, or another service, for instance, a wide windowsill to go stand at and put your things at. You have wiggle chairs. And sometimes you can ask the store to give it on tryout, so you can try it out.
Yeah.
But I know a lot of children that need a lot of movement to get their activity up, their alert level up. A wiggle chair, they find it great because they can sit at the table, but they can wiggle.
Yeah.
And that really helps them to focus. You also, it's good to incorporate movement when you do assignments. So you can set up assignments throughout the space that you're working in. Children need to learn to recite some things like the math tables. Well, jump while you do that, or do a song and dance about a subject, or throw a ball. And you can also try and see if you can do some classes in the playground. And if you're at home and your child really needs to move more, make sure there's enough outside time, and maybe see if you can have a trampoline in the backyard so they can go jumping, or ask them to run up the stairs up and down 2 times. So after that, they may be able to sit still at the table for a longer time. But if they're not able to sit still, just push the chair back and tell them, okay, well, then we'll stand eating. That's okay. Yeah.
There's a huge shift in, like a couple of bits you mentioned there, there's a huge shift in value systems or what you think is right and wrong, isn't there? As far as we're meant to sit down to eat, or you're meant to sit down to learn to concentrate. And suddenly shifting that can be quite difficult, quite uncomfortable for people.
It is. Well, because one of the advice that the strategies we give is to just put your hoodie on when you're over responsive, and or put a cap on. And no, inside you're not supposed to wear a hoodie or a cap. And it's such an easy strategy. And a lot of the kids have hoodies, so they have them with them. Doesn't cost you anything extra. They can just put their hoodie on. And so yeah, we have to kind of fight a little bit with that and say, the values, let's take a good look at them. And what does the child need to be able to be successful? And if he's more successful because he's wearing a hoodie, please let him wear the hoodie. And it was really funny because there was a boy, he was having trouble concentrating in the classroom. And he was 13, 14 years old. And so finally they said, okay, he's allowed to wear his hoodie during when he's working by himself. And they were evaluating that a couple of weeks later. And he had not only put on his hoodie, he'd also put his earbuds in and was listening to music. And he was doing so much better.
Yeah. But that's it. But it's perceived as not listening, not engaging, not focusing, not behaving.
Yeah, but when they're giving, the rules are when the teacher gives instructions, take the hoodie off so the teacher knows and can see that you're attending and see your eyes and see that you're listening. But when you're doing your own work by yourself, please, put it on. It's okay. Yeah, by all means.
That's good. So obviously you deliver this because you train as well, don't you? Sort of deliver this training, as you pick about, you deliver it virtually. So you're used to this format we're in right now, and you deliver it to teachers, I should imagine a lot, but also parents and caregivers as well.
Definitely. Yeah. I had one yesterday. Yeah.
Who you delivered to yesterday? A parent, was it? Just
Also, there was one parent, and the others were psychologists and orthopedagogues. Do you call them that?
OTs or pedagogy?
No.
Yeah.
No, OTs. I had one OT, one physical therapist, and then the rest was behavioral specialists. That's the group, the behavioral specialists. So mostly it's behavioral specialists and teaching specialists. Mm-hmm. And I definitely also have parents coming. Yeah, because it's all it's in layman's terms. All the behavior specialists really like it because they learn to talk in a way that the parents understand. Yeah, instead of all the medical terms. So the way I give it, everyone can understand. Yeah.
Yeah. So what do you find are probably the most common challenges that caregivers and educators experience? And is there any success stories from those who've applied your methods that you'd like to talk about?
Yeah. So in the classes, what we see more and more happening is that the teachers give room to all the movement that's going on. So children are allowed to stand, and children are allowed to wiggle in their chairs as long as they're not disturbing anyone else. So that's really nice. One of the things that's also happening, which is not good, is that too many people are using the headphones to drown out all the noise, but they're using it too much. And this means that, as we said, the autonomic nervous system needs information to know if you're safe or not safe. So if you, for instance, drown out all the audio, this system might become more sensitive because they're not hearing enough, which means that somebody's already sensitive becomes more sensitive. It's better to choose audio, to put in earbuds and put on some music, because then you also drown out your surroundings and you can work. So, but there's a lot of room for behavior now, and understanding is the most difficult thing. When people still think, no, there's rules, we need to sit still to be able to learn. But we've got science on our backs because science shows us, movement and learning together this works. And there was um, um, research done on a couple of schools. What they did is 6 classes were learning standing up. So
Right.
This was the Maths and Dutch, which would be English with you. Those 2 subjects, they were given while moving. And so, for instance, they would get a question on the subject, and then they would have the answer A, B, or C. And they would say, okay, if you think it's A, you jump. If you think it's B, you lunge. If you think it's C, you clap or you turn around. That's the way they were taught these subjects. And what they saw after 2 years is that the experimental group were ahead 5 months compared to the controls.
Wow.
So this is a huge success, and because this information is now out there, people are using it more and more. So this is really, really, really a large success that we now are starting to understand from all the science that's being done, that combining learning with movement is really the smart thing to do. So I think that's a huge success.
I think there is a shift. I think there's so much common sense behind that in some ways, in what you just went through there, because human beings, we're animals, and therefore we've never been designed to just sit in one place for long periods of time. It doesn't really make any sense. I did hear one time, as far as one of the biggest challenges that we have, that we spend so much time indoors in this very unnatural environment. We didn't evolve to have,
No.
corners and squares, and
Yeah.
they're
And it
even
makes us
finding.
depressed.
Yeah, absolutely. They're finding that even the way that cities are laid out, if it's too kind of linear and too patterned, is
Yeah.
significantly affecting mental health and things like that. There's I don't know how much weight I'd put behind it, but there's some evidence related to mass shootings related to the layout of cities and stuff like that they're doing. As far as,
Wow.
but if you think about even a room, the echo of a noise in a room, the lighting that I'm in this room at the moment is also unnatural. The sounds are unnatural. The light's unnatural. Do you think that there'll be a point where we go back to actually, because I know for many children with sensory processing, the outside world is significantly friendlier in the fact that
It is
the noise
because
is
we know nature helps. We know nature makes us feel better. When we're sick, we get better when we're in nature. I think we're having a really big problem because what you said about we're not meant to sit down as much. And we are sitting down so much more, the little kids too, because of all the screens we have, and we get stuck behind them. And I don't know about the UK, but we're having a major mental health problem and emotional dysregulation in children. They're not moving enough and they're not getting enough experience in handling all this input. They're not getting experience in being frustrated because someone says, no, I don't want to play with you. And then the other one says, yes. So, okay, I have survived being let down. He doesn't want to, but the other one does. And this is all experiences that you need to go through, and you need to feel the sand. You need to walk. You need to feel the air. You need to move to be able to regulate your system. And because we're not moving as much, we see that there's a lot of mental health problems. It's turning out to be a big problem. And what I see is that a little response. There's a lot of education now around social media and being behind social media and get out of that and go move also, because we're seeing yeah, the numbers are really bad, and it's not just COVID. It's not just COVID. This generation that was 2 years out of being with people, and this is also a problem. But the biggest problem is that we're sitting down too much, and you have. Do you also call that helicopter parenting? That you're too much above your child and making sure they don't fall and they don't get frustrated. They need to fall. They need to get frustrated, because if you do not learn how to deal with that, you're going to have a very difficult life.
Yeah, absolutely. I think as well, I remember a study I read years ago, this is now, there was a situation in New Zealand, I believe, where it was a school who had, they were having some renovations and work done. And usually they'd obviously cordon this all off and stop the children playing in it. But they actually, for whatever reason, they made this decision, a bit of an experiment, of they opened it up. And the children were allowed to kind of play in the building site, and they were climbing on stuff and running around stuff. And obviously there was a bit of a backlash on this, but what they found is accidents significantly reduced. They didn't go up, they significantly reduced, because children were learning to risk assess themselves rather than, and seeing other people have accidents meant, oh, I won't do that, rather than being so coddled that then it was a case of, but also their concentration, their improvement within the classroom, because they weren't having to walk this line of control all the time. They were able to then get rid of their energy, engage in nature, as we just said, regulate their sensory system naturally, meaning that then they could sit for a longer period of time or concentrate more effectively. So
That's it. What you said, the risk assessment, learning, what do I do? What do I not do? My son, I know he last year he likes to take some photos. He's got a nice camera, and I knew he was going to go up to a building site which was walled off. He was not allowed in, but he told me he was going to. I said, well, just take care. And he came back with ripped pants, but also, this is where he needed to risk assess. And if the cops get you, I'll leave you there for a little bit before I come to get you. It's your thing, your decision. Yeah, he was 15 at the time, and it's your decision. And I really appreciate you telling me this. And I'm not going to stop you. I know you need to do these things, and you need to fall down and get yourself up. Yeah.
It's the same principle. A very simple way I put that across is that if you never let your child cross the road because you're worried about them getting hurt, then one day you're not there anymore. The first time they cross the road, they're going to get hit by a car. So instead, what you do is you encourage them to cross the road, you monitor them for a while, and you teach them how to do it independently. And then when you're not there anymore, they'll still be safe. And that's
exactly. We live in Amsterdam, and then we teach our children to bike to school, which in Amsterdam is quite scary. But there was also one parent that was too scared. There'd been a terrible accident at one of the corners that we always need to pass. So she always took her child on the back of her own bike. And then in 7th grade, they had to do an exam, a bike exam in Amsterdam, where there's parents standing on corners and marking if they stop and if they give way. And so she was the only one that didn't pass that exam. So she's not safe biking in Amsterdam.
Yeah. So behind the others, more vulnerable as a result. Yeah, 100%.
As a result of the parent just being too scared to let her go out. Now you need to be there and let them go out and guide it a little bit. And you can't guide it all.
I think that's
which is scary.
It is, and I think pulling it back to the sensory processing, I think there is, as you said there, the habituation is our ability to kind of cope with the information, isn't it? So, and one of the theories around sensory processing is that children with sensory processing, or individuals with sensory processing, don't habituate in a typical way. So they don't kind of get used to it in the same way. So the first time if I go to a firework display and I hear a bang, first time I go, oh, I jump. But then my brain goes, oh, I didn't get hurt, I didn't get injured, it's okay, I can cope with that. So if, however, my habituation system doesn't work, every bang's going to make me jump because it doesn't connect. So rather than going, so never let them hear the bang, which is what you were saying about the ear defenders, never let them hear a bang again, maybe I need to build up and slowly get used to those sounds over a period of time.
And also if that doesn't work well, what you can do is put earbuds in and listen to music, and then listen to the bangs, because you're already processing auditory information. The bang won't get in as hard, and then you can kind of tone down the volume on what you're listening to and see if you can deal with it. And sometimes it'll be the case you can't deal with it, but then maybe you can wear a squeeze vest. I don't know if you know the squeeze vest. It squeezes you pump air in it. while you're going to situations that you know are difficult for you. So not only can you try to get used to it, if you're not able to get used to it, you can see what other strategies are there so I can go into that situation because I do want to.
Yeah.
And if you know you get really overwhelmed by going to a party, then maybe go 1 hour and make sure that the next day you have nothing so you can get well again. You know?
Reset. Yeah, reset.
Yeah, reset. Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. So what do you wish that more people understood about sensory processing?
That it's different for everyone, and you can't just say, "Oh, why are you acting like that?" It's not that bad. You shouldn't judge. Don't. I want people not to judge, to listen to others and say, "This is what I need," and I want people to learn for themselves what they need, so they can ask about it. They just say, "Okay, I'll come to your party, but I'll only come for an hour because I get overwhelmed." And I really want to be there, so I'll come for an hour. And then don't judge people because they leave. It's only now getting nice. Why are you leaving? Well, because I cannot do this. And so I want people to learn. That's why I wrote this, and for themselves. And I want people not to judge. I have, for me, it's getting more difficult. I was diagnosed with Parkinson's 3 years ago. And so I'm already on the over-responsive spectrum as it is. And the Parkinson's not helping in that. So I still do go to bars and I still do go to parties. But my friends know that when I say bye, it's enough. And I don't even say goodbye then because I start yawning first and then I start getting a little bit dizzy and then I wave and I go. Yeah. And people know. So be informed and support and do not judge.
I think that's such an important message for you as an individual, isn't it? As kind of to know it's okay to step away. It's okay. I think there's problems with the fear of missing out is one that a lot of people pleasing is another one that people are going to struggle with. But I think if you get taught that from an early age again, and that's where maybe it's really useful for teachers and parents to kind of know this stuff. Because if I'm taking my child to a party, but I understand that my child has some sensory differences or difficulties, maybe I need to plan just to go for an hour and then we'll see how it goes, rather than we plan to go all night and then we then have to cut it short. So we plan it the other way around, going, let's manage our expectations, what our child could do. And if they're having a great time and they're having a great night, then we'll keep going. We'll stay a little bit longer, but we're just going to say, we're only coming for an hour.
And bring with you strategies and say to the child, this is what we can do. If it gets too much, we took your, you can listen to an audio story because I arranged that you can be in their bedroom when it gets too much. And also we can go walk around the block. And if you need to, we can go home. But also the teachers and the parents need to model that you need to model this. I would get home and I'd go lay down on the couch and put something over my head. It was like a weighted toy that I put over my head. And then my partner and our son would know, okay, I'm out for the count. In about 20 minutes, I'll be there again. So model what you need, you can make this understanding that if I sit on this couch with this pillow or the cat on my lap, you do not disturb me. I am trying to regulate. Okay, I need to get down from all the input that I got. So model also, yeah, and talk about what you're doing. That you say, okay, I'm going to stand in the shower for 20 minutes now because it was a little bit too much today. And if we talk now, I'll probably get really irritated. I'd say to my son, like, yeah, let's not talk now because I feel I'm responding really irritated and you do not deserve this. This is me being totally overwhelmed. So let's talk in about half an hour. So model is just important.
There's a couple of bits you mentioned there as well, which I think is worthwhile drawing attention to. You said, like, if the cat is on my lap or I show this behaviour means I need that time. I think for some individuals, especially if they're in a slightly dysregulated state, they're feeling a little bit in overwhelm, it can be really difficult to verbalize. If you understand, obviously, the way the brain works, if I'm going into my fight or flight, well, communicate. We've all been in a nervous situation where maybe a public speech or, a job interview where suddenly your vocabulary wasn't available to you properly, because when we go into fight or flight, our communication, Broca's area of the brain, starts to shut down a little bit. So it can be really difficult to go, I'm struggling right now, to actually verbalize that. So having that proactive kind of strategy to go, if you do this, then I'll know. Even with, you said you did it earlier with the timeout kind of thing. Just having some symbols, some methods to communicate that don't necessarily involve language, I think is really useful as well.
Yeah, then you can make sure there's a shawl that you'd say, if I put this shawl around my neck, it's done. Or in a classroom situation, you can have something that is red on one side and green on the other. And you'll have green on top, but somebody will turn it around to red and say, okay, keep your distance from me, I'm done. You even have bracelets, emotion bracelets, that you can put on green, or you can turn it around and they're red. Yeah, those are great things, because when you are in green, you can communicate and ask for help. But when you're already in the stress system, in the orange, communicating is hard. So yeah, showing it in another way, that's really helpful.
Yeah, love that. So sort of last question that we'll kind of do is so you've been doing this for a wee while now, a little while. Yeah. So you've obviously gained a lot of experience.
Spare myself when I say that.
Yeah. And you're 4 books in with more to come. And obviously 2 of those have been translated to English. And are the other 2, is there plans to get those turned into English as well?
Right now, the Parkinson's, I've also made work of that. It's also part of my work. I wrote a book about that too, the Handbook of Parkinson's Symptoms. I just translated that, so that's done. I am talking to my co-author of the book for learning disabled people, if we're going to do this, to translate this. It'll probably happen, but I'm not sure when. I just this week I spoke to an author in Canada. We might also start working together. So yeah, there's more English stuff coming. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, I'd say I did a review on both of your books that have been translated so far. I thought they were really good. And I think generally for teachers and parents, especially the workbook for me, I think for parents is a must if you think your child has any sensory differences whatsoever. Or to be fair, I think all children, because we all have differences. So they might as well be educated to understand classmates, other children, other people. It's definitely not a bad thing to do. So last question then, what would you say is the most rewarding aspect of your work and what you do?
The response from people that say, now I understand better. Now I understand this behavior and I can deal with it. Yeah.
Yeah. Fantastic.
So the understanding and people having an easier life because of the strategies, that's really, really rewarding. Yeah.
That's wonderful. Okay, thank you so much, Monique, and thank you for spending time with us today and taking us through a bit of a journey. And there's a few little tips and things that I picked up on there, so that was fantastic. So if you've found today useful, please like, share, comment, pass this on to other people who might find it useful. And please also check in the links. We'll put links into Monique's work in there and to our website as well, so that you can go and check out and have a look at the how to make your own fan as well. I think is, and hopefully we'll have the weather to actually need a fan as well, so it would dual purpose.
That would be nice. Yeah.
But thank you so much.
You are very welcome.